Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. I am Joey Chan, the founder of Project I Solutions. I'll be your moderator for this session. Today, our speaker will be talking about Salesforce Flow design patterns from fundamentals to mastery. With Salesforce retiring workflow rules and process builders, this is something that's becoming much more important nowadays, right? So Rakesh is a Salesforce MVP, Navi Mumbai developer user group leader, and blogger at automationchampion.com. He also co-hosts Automation Hour, a bi-weekly webinar series. A design captures an underlying thought process and logic on which a flow is built. As a result, there is a strong correlation between a robust design and powerful process. This session is dedicated towards understanding how to excel in building a robust design pattern and thinking, tackling of complex scenarios and error handling when using Salesforce Flow. So take it away.
And thanks for joining Singapore Dreaming. My name is Rakesh Gupta. I'm a senior solution architect, Salesforce MVP, author, and blogger at automationchampion.com. Today, I'm going to present a topic which is very close to my heart: is Salesforce Flow design patterns. If you're active on social media or you're reading Salesforce newsletter or Salesforce blog, you may heard that Salesforce is designing process builder in few release. It means Salesforce Flow is the only tools in the future to automate business processes. It is right time to learn about Salesforce flows and some of the best practices which or design patterns which you want to follow in your current project or in upcoming project. Salesforce Flow comes in a different flavors. A screen flow, which allow you to take a user input and do some automations. A record trigger flow, which fire in response to database event. A schedule flow, you can write a job which can fire at any point at any given time, like for example, once in a day or once in a week. A platform event triggered flow allow you to subscribe a platform event, whereas an auto launch flow allow you to create a reusable process that you can call from an Apex or flows. I call it as a subflows. In this session, I will walk you through the top 10 tricks and design patterns that you may want to follow in your current project or upcoming project, which I always follow in my projects. Is always plan before you build. Once you get a requirement, try to draw a lucid chart or some process flow diagram using any tool that you like. It will help you to do two things. First, allow you to put your logic in a piece of paper or in a flow diagram for which you can easily implement in Salesforce flows. Second, it also helps you to identify is there any reusable piece of code which I can create that my admin or developers or team members can use in the future. Like for an example, once an opportunity is closed, you may want to create a task and notify the task owner in Lightning experience. You may want to create a reusable component for this one as creation of task might happen when opportunity is closed, quote is closed, or an account is out of business. Like for example here, Stephen is a system administrator and he has given a requirement to create a wizard which allow other administrator to quickly clone a user with their public groups, use and permission set. Now you can imagine this can save lots of time of an admin when it's come to the creating a user. Now if you see a diagram here on your left hand side of the screen, it gives you a high level idea how you can implement or how team members can implement this using a flows and what kind of element they have to use. Do not create flow for everything. If something can be achievable through the out of the box feature, use that. For an example, you may want to display account billing country on opportunity. A formula field is the right solution for it. Or you may want to display number of open opportunities and close opportunity on account. You can use roll up summary field. Or if you want to display in a graphical order, you can use report plus report chart. If something can be better handled through the Apex trigger, use them. Like for an example, you want to handle duplicate records while subscribing a platform event. That can you can handle better in the Apex trigger because, for example, in the single transaction, if you receive a 5 platform event, Salesforce will invoke 5 flows interviews, whereas Apex trigger can only invoke a single transaction. Next, a built-in test sandbox environment. I have done these mistakes in few times at early stage of my career. I often build something on the production. One of the mistake I have done in a couple of years back is someone asked me to build an automations which sending emails to their client, a new client. I created a flow, process builder basically, not a flow. It was a process builder. I created a process builder and tested with 1 or 2 records, and then activated it. And suddenly, I started getting call from my sales director saying that some of the existing customer is getting such emails. Now, that was the time I learned don't do all testing development in productions when it's come to the Salesforce flows or process builder, because Salesforce does not impose any restriction on it. Like if you are a developer, you know that Salesforce does not allow us to make changes in Apex trigger, Apex code in the productions. There are no such restrictions like that for Salesforce flows. So always build and test in Sandbox, because we are playing with this real-time data. So if you make any changes and if something does not work, you are putting your real data at risk. And it might be possible sometimes we create a test record. So you might end up creating too many test record as well. Next, the one record trigger flow per object per types. Now, if you come from a development background, you may follow, or if you really more about those best practices in flows or process builder, you may heard that everyone is saying create one uh, trigger or one flow per object, which is true for the record trigger flow as well. So do not try to create more than one flow per object. Now, when it's come to the flow, there are some limitations you can say. For an example, you cannot create one flow with all the events before create, before update, after create, after update, and before delete, like we do in the Pix trigger. So now here, what I said is create one record trigger flow per object per type. Means only create one before trigger flows, one after trigger flows, and one delete flows, before delete flows. So if you see in the highlight sections, I created record trigger flow for opportunity before, delete, before handle, before create and before update. Then delete handle is basically delete handle is nothing but the before delete, and after handle is nothing but the after create and after update. And use as many as of flows uh, and call it from these record trigger flows, so that you're not going to write same logic again and again. Because see, one of the key things when it's come to the programming, declarative programming or actual programming, when you write the code, reusability is the king. You don't have to write same thing again and again, because maintenance, it will require more maintenance. Now, when you write one trigger record trigger flow per object, it help you to achieve some things. For example, if there is a less likely chances that you are going to hit SQL 101 error or CPU time limit error. Bonus tips. One of the most asked questions on my blogs is how do I manage one record trigger flow per object per type? Do you have any tips? Yes, I do have. The first is never try to set entry criteria for record trigger flow. If possible, like you can see here in this requirement, I selected a screenshot billing country equals to India. Do not do this. There are few reasons for it. First, this is somewhat limited to my current requirement. In the future, I have new requirement. You can obviously go and add the conditions, but now there are some limitations here. Like if I want to say, okay, if opportunity close date is greater than 2 days, Salesforce Flow does not support it. Or if you say that if record type equals to sales, you cannot do such things. Now, second thing is it is not readable. You can like one or two or three, one and two or three condition like this, but you can only read it. It's not readable. So what are the sub suggestions here? Always use decision element to do so. So decision element is much more advanced than entry criteria. It allows you to select record type dot name, or you can select record dot close date greater than this formula date or some specific date. And it is more readable as well. The one thing that I suggest people to use formula, it helps you to create an optimized flows. So I will share one of my experience. Last year I was working with one of the community people when I tried to help him to solve some flow challenges. And one that time he shared his flow which has 140 elements, and we tried to use formula and some of element to reduce it to around 20 elements. Now, how you can use formulas? For an example, let's say that I have created before flows or an after flows. Now, so when you create an after record trigger flows, you will select create and edit. And then you can use a decision element to identify whether it should go to the create path or edit path. Like here you can see, I created a formula which says this new. It means if it's new is true, then go to the new, which means the record is just created and I want to take this route. And if it's the old, then it's basically this record has been updated. Go to this route and take all the actions. You can also use formula like is clone, and there are other formulas which you may use, like for example, if formulas. There are another example where formula can be helpful to create more optimized flows. So if you look at the screenshot one, I have a flow which uses a decision and with their own path. But is there any better way to handle it? Yes. Or is there another way to implement the same thing? Yes. You can also use formula instead of using decision and putting all the assignment here. You can use formula to do so. Like for example, I want to update the close date, and I can write a formula if stage name equal to close one, use today's date. Otherwise, keep the close date, or you can go nested if else statement here as well, and same applicable to next step. So at the end, if you look at the screenshot 3, which is we have only one assignment element, and screen 1 and screen 3, sort 3 is doing the same thing. There is no difference in outcomes, but the difference is how you implement it. Next, build reusable flow as much as possible, which is also called as subflow. Before starting a flow, I just said it earlier, think if there are any possibilities of using this piece of logic in anywhere else. Try to use a reusable flows. A reusable flow in Salesforce is nothing but an auto launch flow. A reusable flow or subflow, you can call it from any flows by just dragging and drop a subflow element. And it also allows you to pass value from your parent flow to subflows. Now, we talk about Salesforce Flow and how you can achieve business outcomes using clicks. But there are some situations where Salesforce Flow is not sufficient, and you have to then plug invocable epics. Like for an example, what happens if I want to generate a quote PDF? So Salesforce quote has out-of-the-box template to generate a PDM by clicking on the button. But I want to automate such processes. So someone create a code, let's automatically generate the PDF. Again, there is no way that you can automate such things by just using flows. So that's where you have to use an Apex class, which you can invoke via flows. Or if you have a list of account ID and you want to say, okay, can I get all list of opportunity for such account ID? Flow does not allow, or Flow does not have such capability, if I put it correctly. So get element only allow you to pass single ID. You cannot take list of ID. So in such places, you can use Apex class to get more out of your flows. When you create an Apex class, you have to put at the rate of invocable method annotations, and then you can call it from a flows. Only one invocable method annotations you can use per Apex class. It supports primitive S-object Apex defined classes as an input and output. While writing Apex class, make sure that you are following Salesforce best practices for bulk safe. Next, do not hard code ID, query them. I have done this mistake in the past, just hard coding the ID when I started my career in Salesforce, but eventually I learned that is not a best practice. Do not write or hard code ID. Why? Because let's say for example, you created a flow and you are comparing profile ID in Sandbox, but as soon as you move to the production, the ID is going to be the different. Now, how do you have to then go to the flow and then update it? That's not a best practice. There's a better way to do that. Like for example, here I am creating an approval matrix, and I have to fetch the approval matrix for based on the lead source, the type of opportunity. So now, instead of hard coding all this, I can just create a custom metadata type, and I can save all the details, and the runtime I can fetch it. The best part is if a business want to change the opportunity approval for where and customer existing upgrade, you have to just go to the custom metadata type and do that. And it can be done by a system admin as well, or any person who has access to the setup. No skills to required to update the flows. There are other ways as well you can do so. You can also use custom labels to store it, or you can use custom object in some situations if you want to use. But never, never, ever hard code the IDs. Next, handle error with fault path. So now, okay, you created a flow, it is working, but not always, because it might be possible sometime it fail at runtime. What happens this time? So Salesforce send an email alert with you. Now you can also write fault message. If you put a fault message on the screen flow, you can able to display a better message to user instead of just displaying a generic error message. So you can display, okay, there is some error occur, this is the error message, and you may want to reach out to Salesforce admin rakesh.gupta@abc.com. When you put the fault element in a record trigger flow, it allows you to capture more details, and you can use that details to investigate later, because remember, Salesforce only save such logs for 48 to 72 hours. You may receive an email, but by mistake you delete it. Then how do you go and retrieve it? So this is the best way. When using fault element with the record trigger flows, you can do something like, okay, save an error message in a custom object, or you can publish a platform event, or you can notify a group of people with the detailed error message. Next, use debug log, identify why a flow fails at runtime. So flow fails at runtime. Don't worry, you are not the first person to getting such message. There are other person on this planet who get such error message. So how do you resolve such problem? The first is you have to debug and identify what is the problem before putting any patch. So the best way is debug log. If you don't know how to use debug log, there are a Trailhead module. You can go and learn more about the debug log. Debug log will show you entire transactions, how flow will started, which flow pass and which node the flow went to, what was the outcome, and at what point flow fails. So it will give you lots of details which help you to identify the problem in your flow. And again, as I said that earlier, do not be panic. You are not the first one who get the error message, and you are not going to be the last one. So be cool. Use the debug log. Plus, when flow fails, Salesforce also send an email alert with lots of details. 50% time, if you look at those emails and if you read very carefully, you may able to identify what is the problem. There are some common problems you may have, like runtime user may not have access to such fields or access the object, or SQL problem, or DML 150 problem, or CPU time limit, or heap size limit. But there might be other problem. So cool down, use debug log, identify the problem first, and then look for the solution. It's time for bonus tips. Never ever put a DML statement inside the for loop. This is one of the biggest mistake. If you look at the screenshot first, I am creating line items inside the for loop. So this is very bad practice. Why? For example, if your loop contains more than 150 records, then this at the 150 record, this will give you a DML exception, 150 exception. Now, how do you overcome such limits? So if you look at the screenshot 2, uh, where it says assign data to a record variable. So I create a record variable, assigning all my data there, holding the data in the record variable. And the next step, in the next assignment, I'm adding such variables into the record collection. So holding all the data, if there are 150, 160, it doesn't matter. The record can hold such records. The record collections variable can hold that many record. And at the end of the flow, you can see create line items, and I am passing that record collections variable to create all the record in the single bus. So this will help you to create an optimized flow, as flow has same transaction limit as per Apex because the runtime engine is same. So make sure that you don't do all these mistakes. Now what next? If you want to learn more about Apex Basic for Admin or Flow Basic, Flow Builders, or Flow Design without limits, look for these Trailhead modules where you can find step-by-step instruction with lots of details and real-time use cases. Thanks to Singapore Dreaming sponsor, Accenture, UST, Global, Form Assembly, Validity, and others. Thanks for Singapore Dreaming sponsors, Accenture, UST Global, Form Assembly, Validity, Communicate, Epistocky, and Capital, and Salesforce. Thanks for it.
Thank you, Rakesh, for sharing your expertise here. I know Flows is getting so much more popular now, right? In the past, there's quite a lot of admins that are quite hesitant to try Flows because of being intimidated. But now everybody's basically forced to learn it, right? So I'm sure your blog will be a lot more popular. And thank you for all of the learning resources. I've actually posted the link to Automation Champion website. So anybody that's interested in checking a lot of those videos that you've posted and learning resources. All right. So now for the Q&A. So we have several questions here, though. One of the things that's being asked, not just in this session, but around the Salesforce community is what is the best practice for migrating existing workflow rules and related actions to Flow Builder?
So this is the exactly same question today we discuss in automation hour with one of our speaker Michael. So lots of people ask, how do you move from when it's come to the moving from workflow rules to process builder, and what are some best practices? So one thing that we agreed, everyone agreed, is like Salesforce has Salesforce Optimizer. So when you run the optimizer, it will tell you which workflow rules and process builder has run in the last or not run. So this is one way that it can tell you, the any automation tools can tell you. The second thing is, again, all automation tool has some step is you have to look into the your all automations and try to first draw a diagram, and this is again a good opportunity for you to clean some automations, because what happens is we create some automations a couple of times, and then we never go and check whether this automation is still valid, because business requirement change may very frequently every year or every quarter. So you may want to go to all those workflow rules and process builder, review it first, and make a process flow diagram. If you have a process flow diagram, then your migration is going to be very, very, very smooth, because the next step is you have to just transfer all those processes into a single workflow rule, and you can follow the design patterns like having one before save, one after save, and then one before delete, and you can use subflow or apex class as needed to migrate.
All right. So there's another question here. Can we change the data type of a variable once it's created in Lightning Flow? Design.
Unfortunately, no. Like you can do in Apex trigger or Apex, when you declare the variable, you can always change. But unfortunately, not in Salesforce Flow. So once you declare a variables, you cannot. It is not possible to change the data type. And there are an idea. You may want to vote.
Yep. So is it recommended to transit to Flow now, or workflow and process builder will be phasing out, or should we wait?
It is again a best practice. The first thing is you have to stop using process builder and workflow rule for any new requirement. At least you can start using a Salesforce flows, and then again, phasing out and moving workflow rule and process builder is a time consuming, and again it requires a dollar amount as well. You may have to think. And Salesforce, I heard attended a couple of webinars, and I heard that Salesforce is also bringing some of the tools which will help you to speed up this conversion process. So you may want to wait if you can, but again, but
Right. Yeah, I think we lost Rakesh. So let's probably wait a bit. Um, Probably I could actually address some of the questions here, though. So let's see. So what is the sequence of execution for trigger, process, builder, and flow? There's actually a documentation that tells you the order of operation. So simply search in Google for Salesforce order of operation, and then you'll be able to see each of the steps in terms of what exactly runs first and things like that. Take note, this is something evolving. Every now and then, Salesforce would change the operation there. So just something to keep in mind. So, what would be the best practice to get familiarized with the different automation tools? Of course, as usual, it's really Trailhead. But on top of that, there are quite a lot of other websites or blogs that you can learn from. Like, for example, automationchampion.com. That's where you could actually see a lot of the different options. All right. So we have, let's see. So far, I think that's it for the questions.
I'm
So we
here.
still have a bit more. Hey, Rakesh.
Hey, I'm back. Sorry, it was a quick electricity outage. Sorry.
All right, no worries. So I'm not sure if you'd want to add. What would be the best practice to get familiarized with the different automation tools?
There is a Trailhead module which I can share the link here in a moment. So you can go through it, and it has very specific steps and detail out when to use which automation tools. Now there is no confusion because we have only Salesforce Flow and approval process, and it is very clear out. Approval process is required when you want to implement an approval digitalized in Salesforce. Otherwise, automation tools is Salesforce Flows, because we don't have any workflow rule and process builder. So forget workflow rule and process builder now onwards, and start using Salesforce flows.
All right. There's also another question asking about the order of execution. I actually already addressed that. There's actually uh, a page, and I actually posted the link to it regarding what runs first, whether it's before save flows and how it blends with triggers and process builders.
Yeah,
All right.
which is very, very helpful to, very, very useful to understand what is the trigger of order of execution. Because if you don't understand, then you may not able to design the right automations for your business use case.
Mhm. Yep. Take note, it's not just for developers, even admins should actually know about that because there are actually certain use cases. Companies tend to combine triggers and declarative automation. So, and they're expecting things to work a certain way, and there are going to be some bugs that you'll see if that's not how it's operating, right? So, very important to learn and understand that. All right. Any other last minute questions? We still have a bit more time. Believe yes, we can get this PowerPoint, okay, right? So,
Yep, I already said the PowerPoint, but I will say it
mhm.
again.
Yep. And then looks like that's it for the questions. Thank you again, Rakesh, for the privilege of having you. And
No, thank you
of
so much.
course, for all of those that are interested in learning more, I know this is very important, and this is something that the earlier and of course make sure to test it out in the sandbox first, right? I
Yeah.
know everybody can actually do it directly in production, but that's not the best practice. All
Most of
right.
the admins and business users who are like business users come system admin, they do all these flows and every process builder in productions because the Salesforce never stops you to do that because it is only restriction only apply to the Apex trigger. But don't do such mistakes, and you have to follow the best practices here. And
Right.
Salesforce also have a couple of articles. If you go to the architect.salesforce.com, there are Salesforce architect decision guide on record trigger flow. And then Adam recently posted a very long articles on some of the best practices in Salesforce. So do follow. I will share those links down here in the chat. But do make sure that you read it out.
Yep. I just sent the link to that, so you could look for that later on. All right. Any other last words, Rakesh?
Not from my side. Let me know if you have any
All
questions. You
right.
can feel free to reach out to me on my website or LinkedIn, Twitter, and I'm happy to answer any question that you have.
Yep. Sure. All right. Thank you again, Rakesh, for the privilege. And
Thank
for
you.
the there are still several sessions for today, so looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.